If you spend any amount of time looking into board games as you start to be more and more interested in the hobby, it's not going to take long before you come across a title called Gloomhaven. And that's because it's the highest rated game on Board Game Geek. If you knew nothing about board games, you go to this ranking and you want to play the best of the best, the game that's heralded as the ultimate form of board games, and you come to Gloomhaven. And that is a game that is not for everybody. There's terrain you have to set up, there's a huge amount of rules overhead to learn before you're able to start playing. So in a real stroke of genius, they came out with Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. Now you can get this at Target, your game store, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, any place you can get games. This thing is really, really widely accessible, and you can get it at a really pretty cheap price. I think I got this for 20 bucks on some sale. And so to be able to dip your toes into that expensive Gloomhaven with this little kind of starter set, so to say, is a really great opportunity. And as someone who is newer, right, I really wanted to get into that Gloomhaven, right? It's a big, heavy strategy fantasy game, dungeon crawler. It sounds like a lot of things that I would like, but again, I was, like a lot of people, kind of put off by the price and the size of the box and all of that. And so naturally, I found myself playing Jaws of the Lion. It's also, I think, like the 4th or 5th highest rated game. People love it, right? It's very much that condensed Gloomhaven. And I want to talk about this kind of in two perspectives. One is, how well does Jaws of the Lion work as a tutorial? If I'm new to board gaming and I open the box, am I able to kind of unpack everything and really start to learn myself? And how long does it take until you're kind of self-sufficient, able to play without too much hand-holding? And the second perspective I want to look at, and it's one that I feel is less talked about, is how does Jaws of the Lion stand up on its own, right? If you start from tutorial mission 1 up to mission 25, there's a couple side missions there, but me and my play group, we finished it after about 18 sessions doing most of the side missions. I know, and I kind of want to share what my perspective, and if after playing this 25 mission Gloomhaven, am I eager to go out and get the big box and really get into it and get into the full experience. And, I feel like that's a little bit less talked about. People love to kind of talk about the tutorial side of it, but how does it stand up on its own? But my name is Jared with Board Game Apprentice, and let's get into talking about Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. Alright, so first let's talk about how does Gloomhaven work out if you just open this box as, again, someone who maybe just picked it off at Target, it looked really cool box art, you've heard of Gloomhaven maybe on some article about board games and how great it is, and you get it. I do think that it starts off really well, right, with this little worksheet, welcome to Gloomhaven. It really walks you through what zip bags to put everything, how to organize everything. This is really nice. A lot of complex board games have started to come with kind of this deconstruction guide of being overwhelmed, especially when there's a couple boxes in this game that are supposed to be opened up at specific points during the campaign, so you're not accidentally just ripping everything open and spoiling things for yourself. And I should mention, this kind of first part, talking about the tutorial, will be spoiler friendly. I'm not going to go into details on anything, but once I do start talking about the campaign as a whole, I do want to kind of touch on specific missions, but I will mention that before I go and start talking about stuff. And really, as a tutorial, it kind of comes with a larger glossary rule book, and it also comes with this great learn to play guide. And really, the first 5 scenarios of this game are going to be straight up tutorial. It's really stripped down in the first mission, and they're going to keep adding on mechanics through each subsequent mission until eventually you are playing a full game. So there are 4 different characters in this game, kind of ranging from the Hatchet, who is a really cool DPS character. My party had the Hatchet, the Void Warden, which is kind of a more range spellcaster, debuffer, healer type role that I played, and then we also had the Red Guard, which is more of the tank, really frontline kind of person. I would really see, the lines are very blurred with what each person filled. I felt like every person could do damage, every person could heal a little bit. Every class felt very versatile. And I do feel like they weaved together really well with all their abilities. They felt different, but they also worked together very well. It felt like there was a lot of thought between how do these different abilities interact with each other, and I think that was a great part of it. And as you start to walk through these first 5 missions, it is a nice way to kind of teach you through it. If you have no idea what Gloomhaven is, really the core mechanic of the game are these action cards that are going to have a top action and a bottom action, and then a number in the middle that's going to determine the order you go in. Because all of the players are going to have an initiative number, and all the monsters are going to have an initiative number, and that's going to determine who goes first. So sometimes you want to go last, sometimes you want to go fast, and managing those cards are really important. That's kind of the core loop of the game, right? Managing that hand of cards, you have items, you have other stuff, but really those hands of cards, and as you go through the through the mission, you're going to be permanently losing these cards, and once you're out of cards, you're out, right? You're knocked out for the whole round. And so making sure you're managing those cards, because some cards, once you use them, they're super powerful and cool, but you gotta discard them as soon as you use them. So knowing when to pull the trigger and do something really flashy versus let's just hang back and do some healing or really just rest or something is really part of the core puzzle of Gloomhaven. And I will say, just as a whole, that really card mechanic that it has is very fun. It is a great system. And it really, you don't get through an 18-session campaign unless you like the main mechanic of it. And I will say that I do like the mechanic of it. I think where it starts to get a little bit of, overwhelming is sometimes there's a lot of smaller rules. I know the one big rule that my group missed out on to like the last 2 missions or something is that when monsters die, they're supposed to drop money. And we were playing like Gloomhaven poverty mode because we had no items. We were like, how the heck are you supposed to afford these items? Are we just missing something? And yes, we were missing something because every time something dies, you are supposed to drop a coin. So that was on us to miss it. But I think that was the only major rule that we missed. The Learn to Play guide has a lot of quick kind of references. And honestly, up until the very last day we were playing it, we were using this. Especially things like, as you go on and as your characters level up, you're going to have scenario levels, and there's like, okay, the gold conversion is this, the trap damage is this, you get this much bonus experience, right? There's no way to internalize that unless you really want to memorize it. So you will be referring to this, but I do think that the Learn to Play guide and the glossary are organized very well, and it's pretty easy to look things up on the fly. But there was always those fringe cases where we had to go online and double check something. So it is a lot. Status conditions and these elements that you can infuse to use other abilities. You got to keep track of those in between every round. And I understand there are digital tools, and we're not opposed to those, but we did track everything, physically with the game board. So that was a little bit of annoyance. But if you kind of assign everyone a task as far as you do this, you do this, you do this, it makes it pretty manageable rather. But yeah, don't have one person be the bookkeeper because it can be very tough for one person to keep up with everything and to remember all the little rules that are going on. So by the end of the first 5 missions, you start with your level 1 cards. You're kind of in a position to go out into the world. And not to get too much into the story, but I do think that the kind of narrative of Jaws of the Lion is probably a very weak part of it. My group came from playing like a short D&D campaign, and I read online, I was fully aware that this is not a role-playing game. Like, do not go into this thinking that you're going to be making character decisions or really getting into your character. You can, we had some fun, like, oh, the Void Warden would definitely do this, the Red Guard would do this. There are ways to kind of flavor it up, but this is not at all a role-playing game. Every so often you have kind of city events after missions, and as a group you can make a decision of what you want to do, but really that's the extent of what you're getting there. You can pick up side missions. Each character, I believe, has a specific character mission that you can get from the city events. We didn't actually draw all of those since we were picking them randomly. So that's kind of the most character flavor you get. So do not go into this thinking you're getting a role-playing game. This is very much hand management, card management, puzzly game where you're trying to get the most out of the cards you're equipping for this game. So I think the tutorial, step-by-step, mission-by-mission, introducing new mechanics, 100% great. That was amazing. I really do find that I think people play through those first 5 missions and then kind of taper off or fall off, but I do think that the first 5 missions are a pretty good experience, right? You end that with a boss battle after those first 5 missions. It's a pretty nice self-contained, and then the story goes on. As I said, it's not that great. I think in the second part of this video I want to get into the complaints about the story and a little bit of my thoughts on it. But I think in the first 5 missions the story is good enough and it kind of keeps you going from place to place. I guess the story in general, right, you're kind of Jaws of the Lion, which is this mercenary group in Gloomhaven, and you pick up a job, and then of course it becomes something bigger than you expected. Things go on and things develop from there. I think to give you a flavor of Gloomhaven, those first 5 missions are great. After those first 5 missions, you're going to know if you like it enough to continue on or if you want to repack everything and try to resell it or get rid of it, or if it's just not right for you. And I think for the 20 bucks that you can pick this up, I think that's a great opportunity. But I want to say, if you want to get the kind of full experience, let's talk about that next. So as a quick summary before we get into the spoiler side of things, if you're looking for a taste of Gloomhaven, I think the first 5 missions are great. The tutorial is great, very nice, hold your hand. But what about when you get past that first 5 missions? And this is where I'm going to start talking about specific scenarios, specific ones that I think were really great, and some that I really think fell flat for me. And why, kind of by the end of it, I really wasn't eager to go out and get a full Gloomhaven experience. I felt like this really gave me the experience that I wanted. So I have the scenario booklet here because there were a couple I wanted to highlight, because I think when the game is strong, it is really strong and really fun and feels very thematic and immersive, and you're like, oh, you're this cool mercenary group of badasses doing stuff. And other times some missions feel like a chore and a slog and just almost unfun sometimes, and you're just like, it's, I want to blame the difficulty. And one quick thing is the scenario leveling, right? How you need to calculate the scenario level, where you take the average party level divided by 2, and then you have to round up. And sometimes you are at like 0.1 or 0.2 of that rounding, and you have to round up, and you have one person who's a higher level than everyone else, and that is not fun for the lower level people. It really feels like you're getting punished for not finishing your bonus mission or getting enough bonus XP throughout missions. So that was a little bit annoying, and that was pretty much the only time. I think we failed 2 or 3 missions throughout the entire run of this, and that was, I think, the only time it happened was when someone was over leveled and pulling the scenario level up, and the other 2 people were not. I think that the scenario, the last one that ends with I'm going to start talking about specific things here. It ends with a really cool boss here, the Blood Tumor. That's really challenging, right? It's a cool boss where every time you damage it, it heals, right? So you really want to make sure you're timing your attacks correctly and not trying to overheal it. And that is an awesome way to start things off, because the kind of overall plot of this is like this, you learn that it's like this blood cult trying to summon an evil god, that whole thing. And I think it starts really strong where you are this group of mercenaries, right, who are trying to find a lost person, and then you get involved with this. But the big problem is that story is not strong enough through each of these missions. It kind of feels like you're just kind of doing random stuff, and then sometimes you get a little bit of this plot, but it just felt really uneven. And I really wish, Jaws of the Line, if you were just doing these cool one-off scenarios, just mercenary, do whatever you want kind of thing, I think that would have been a much more fun experience than this kind of half-baked story that doesn't really have any memorable characters, and you just kind of like, okay, we beat the blood god at the very end, because the actual nemesis that you're chasing throughout this shows up like twice before the end, and then you fight him and it's over. And the story is not great. I say that because when I think back to what I really enjoyed about this, and there was 2 missions that I think I really, really enjoyed that just kind of stuck out to me. It's a mission called the Gauntlet, and you are in this, I'm looking at it in front of me here, I'll put it up on the screen. You are in this like arena, and there's traps and there's poison gas, and like enemies are chasing you through, and you can kind of, if you push them into the trap, you can do damage to them. And it feels like you're really cool, like these mercenaries, the gladiators in this ring, and you're playing out and trying to run through this gauntlet. And I think this was like the standout. This is, I think, the 8th or 9th mission, depending on if you get side missions. And I thought like, wow, this is awesome. I can't wait to see what other cool maps we get. And you don't get a lot of other cool maps. A lot of other maps are, you kill an enemy and they spawn more enemies. Or you kill an enemy and it explodes. And that's okay, right? You want to push things, you got to maneuver, position yourself. That's okay, but then they blow up. And if this enemy blows up next to this enemy, it'll spawn this enemy. Or if you have this table up at the start of every round, more things are going to spawn. And that is not super fun. Sometimes those really felt like a slog. And that's part of the fun of Gloomhaven, right? That you're really being pushed to the limit of how are you going to maximize these cards to get out of these difficult scenarios. But I just wish that those challenges that they were presenting were a little bit more interesting. One of the other really, really standout missions for us was the heist. And this is, I think, I think this mission links to another one, so you can kind of go on this branching path, and you can get to the heist, and I don't know what the other path is. But the heist is you're like in the sewers, and then you pop out of the sewers, and you're like in this mansion, and there's a lot of gold and a bunch of treasure chests, but every time you grab a chest, a stone golem comes to life, and like there's the security guards. And again, when you're leaning into this cool mercenary theme, and you're doing cool stuff, and heist and stealing, this is really good. I love the heist and the gauntlet. Those are, I think, the two most memorable scenarios we did. And then we did some of the side scenarios. Those were pretty cool. You know, those usually had more gimmicky or interesting puzzles to them, like tracking down, you know, these demons that were hidden in tables. And when you destroy the table, it spawns, and you don't know which table it is. That was really cool. We did the Void Warden, her character class or character mission, where it's basically just wave defense, and like these demons are pouring out of the void, and you kind of got to stem them and create choke points. That was really cool. So there are some really good highlights. It is just the actual blood cult missions that involve like you fight so many zealots and so many blood imps in this. It feels like there was more monster baggies in this game, but it feels like you fight the same like 3 or 4 monsters the entire time. And sometimes that could be a real bummer when it just feels like every week you're like, oh, we're fighting the zealots again, but now the zealots, when they die, they turn into blood imps, and you gotta fight twice as many things. So just sometimes it feels a little slow and not super fun. Not enough to ruin the experience, right? Because I think for every bad mission, there's a pretty good one to balance it off. But, you know, something longer than the 20, you know, or I think there's 25 total, but we went through 17 or 18. You know, the 18 missions, I can't imagine doing something more than that. You know, I think that if there was another Jaws of the Lion-esque scenario where it's a little bit shorter, condensed, happily play that. But I think that this, for me, is the perfect dose of Gloomhaven. You know, without the story to kind of propel it forward, you know, I think I kind of value that narrative drive to want to keep playing something, and that's something that Gloomhaven just kind of fell flat personally for me, despite its very strong gameplay. As far as the characters, I would say that my experience as playing as the Void Warden was not super great. She feels like, you know, by far the most advanced character out of the 4, and it is hard to make her effective. She's a lot about, you know, using debuffs on people and healing people, and she has a lot of burn cards, and if you're not kind of using those correctly, you can really get yourself in a very tight spot. And I think out of all of our party, I was the one who got knocked out the earliest. You know, usually we ended up winning anyway, but be prepared if you're the Void Warden, it is tough. My other 2 party members, who were the Hatchet and the Red Guard, seemed like they had a great time. But sometimes as the Void Warden, it was rough. And then some of the other story things, the city events are very cool. I do want to gripe a little bit that you don't, unless you want to just pick them out, you don't get every character mission necessarily. Like, we just happened not to pull the Hatchet's mission, which, looking at it now, looks really cool, right? You know, just curious what it is, and it looks like he kind of has that gauntlet arena thing, which seems really cool. But there's no guarantee that you're going to pull that, so sometimes it's a shame, and I guess that's the replayability. You want to go back and play through it again and try to pull that. But I really was not itching by the end of this to play it again. But again, overall, you know, the character progression is pretty good. You kind of have these secret missions, and luckily everyone at our table pretty much was on the same page that these personal missions are never more important than completing it, because sometimes those personal missions, while they're a fun challenge, they can really be a detriment at times. But, you know, overall, it just, yeah. And especially looking at I think the biggest complaint is the lack of variety in the scenarios, doing a lot of the same. You know, while the gameplay is strong, I don't think that was good enough for me to make me want to keep playing it and go on to a full campaign. But I think if you're interested, with those caveats, as long as you're okay with purely it being a mechanical exercise, I think is what Gloomhaven is. As long as you go into it with that expectation, I think it's strong. But I think if you're looking for more of a thematic, immersive, more of an RPG type thing, while you do have some character progression, it kind of falls flat there. But overall, I am happy I played it. I did enjoy my time with it, but I was also glad when we came to the end and it was over. So if you have any narrative game suggestions that you think I'd like, be sure to leave them in the comments below. And I understand Gloomhaven has a huge community and is ranked #1 for a reason. So if I'm making any wrong assumptions or I missed something obvious here, be sure to let me know. I think I'm still open to leaving the door open to checking out full Gloomhaven or Frosthaven, Jaws of the Bear, whatever this iteration is going to be for the new game. I am certainly curious, and I want to learn more. Maybe even try the digital version. I hear that cleans up a lot of the bookkeeping stuff. So overall, I am glad that I gave Gloomhaven a shot. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.